they're recording some sessions so we can put them on the website so folks who, maybe wanted to come to the session but didn't get a chance could check it out later. Folks who weren't able to come to the conference, so we just want to make sure it's all set up. So thank you all for coming to our session. As you said, my name is Gregory. I work at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I'm Assistant Director of Residence Life, so I oversee 5 of our master's level live-in professional staff. And
hi, I'm Arroyo. I'm the Associate Director for Residential Education at Elon University, so I'm right down the road. I've worked in Residence Life far too long, and I'm a lifer. I see some of you in here. I know you're my people. Thank you for being here. And it's very cold, so there's some industrious people in the back that are making use of all their materials. I have this little, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to hide underneath it. So try to stay warm wherever you can, and hopefully you enjoy the presentation.
Great. The presentation is really primarily designed for young professionals, graduate students maybe, folks who are looking to progress through a traditional residence life track. Laura and I kind of put this together as it's kind of a combination of things. So I guess things we had wished we had known a little bit earlier, things that we have talked with our colleagues a lot about, and there's some common challenges for young professionals, or things that I think, as it says, just things we wish you would know and that kind of stuff. So I do think it'll be useful for anybody, kind of where you're at in your career, but that's really who the presentation itself is targeted towards. So learning objectives, as good housing professionals and student affairs folks, we always have learning objectives. So you can see them up there. We won't go over them, won't read them verbatim, but hopefully you come away from this session with some tangible skills, some ideas of things that maybe you can do to kind of improve your working relationship on campus, to kind of build some of those things. Also, we're going to talk to you about some resources that we have available to you after the session that may be helpful to you as well, some professional development guidelines and things like that.
Absolutely. And what Chris was saying about how this is really focused for new professionals, I see some of you in the room that might not be. Please don't be worried that you're maybe in the wrong session. I actually think this could be pretty valuable for you to have some conversation about what are the concerns that new professionals are having, so that if you're supervising them, you can use those tools. Also, a lot of this is very transferable. So there's a lot of guidelines around professional development and creating that plan for yourself. There's some discussion around that. So that's all transferable skills for you to kind of move up as you move through your career. Okay? So we're going to do a few things. We're going to talk about the intersection of graduate school and professional life. This definitely came from the conversation that Chris and I had about what were those things that new professionals think about or unsure who to talk to about. The overall creation of a professional development plan. There's all this conversation about where you're going to be in this field in 5 years, where you're going to be in 10 years. But then we put that away, we unpack it for a minute, we put it away, and we get to work, because we're really practical workers in residence life. And somewhere along the way, sometimes we forget about that. So it's just important to remember that and keep it in the back of your mind so that you can progress through your career. Managing the gray. This kind of connects to politics in the work environments. That could be within your department, it could be within your cohort, or it could be outside within your university. And then decision making at the supervisor department level. So I think of this as the managing up piece. So what are the skills, what are the things to consider when you're having a conversation or a dialogue with your supervisor so that you're speaking the same language? We're going to do a case study. We're going to have a case study that we provide for you, and then we're hoping if there's time for you to have some other dialogue with each other of things that you're seeing on your campus that you have questions or concerns about. And then at the end, we'll talk about the resources that we have. We're going to share everything that we have with you, so have no concerns. If you're interested in takeaways from this or bringing things back to your institution, we'll definitely give you that opportunity.
So, the intersection of graduate school and professional life, and we kind of subtitled this a challenge to integrate. How many of you are in graduate school? Ooh, a healthy number, all right. How many of you have been in graduate school within the last 3 years? All right, even bigger number. I was in graduate school a little bit longer ago than that, but when I think back on myself coming out of graduate school, I think I was well prepared for a lot of stuff. I see folks back in the back smiling. There's a lot of folks from UNCG that have been there since I got there. So they may disagree a little bit on some of these things, but I think I was prepared. I've been an RA for a while. I've done a lot of stuff. Went to grad school, all that kind of stuff. And I came to UNCG, and I thought I had a lot to offer. And I did. Maybe some of the ways I tried to offer that wasn't always the best, and we'll walk through that a little bit. But as we put this presentation together, definitely made me think back, about 10, 11 years ago. started in the field, and some things that, I started to do that I now see my young staff doing, and things that I'm like, wow, did I really do that? Yeah, I did. So, people who choose student affairs, who really loved their undergraduate experience? All right, a good number, yes. Okay, I have found, like when I became an RA for a different reason, but a lot of folks who became an RA loved their RA. Just had a great relationship with their RA. Their RA was fantastic. RA is their best friend, their mentor, etc. I didn't. I was the person that chose student affairs because I actually loved my undergraduate experience, but I became an RA because I really, really, really did not like my RA. So I had 2 RAs. I didn't think either one of them did a good job. I thought everybody else in the hall was, either too strict on policies or didn't care. And anytime they made a mistake, I was the first person pointed out for them. So I became an RA because I thought I could do it better. Okay. How many are in that boat? Is that just me? Okay. I saw a couple people shaking their head. Awesome. People who go into student affairs, though, when you choose, to go to graduate school in student affairs, how many of you in high school would like, hey, I'm going to be a student affairs practitioner? I don't think anybody, right? Folks come to college with a different idea. A lot of times you learn about student affairs in college, and that makes you want to do it, and that's awesome. So folks that tend to go into student affairs tend to really enjoy their graduate experience. It's a lot of work. This is just kind of tough, but there's that commonality, that kind of cohort, and that's great. So, new professionals, all right, want to contribute right away, and I think that's great. We were talking a little bit when we were putting this presentation together. This was really kind of therapeutic for us doing this presentation. I think it is coming to conferences and talking with peers, so you realize you're not the only people struggling with certain things. But this came from the idea of, we interview folks every year, and I told Laura, the thing I hate hearing, when somebody says this, I just shut down, I want to move on to the next interview. If somebody says, I'm going to come in the first year and I'm going to be a sponge, I'm just going to learn stuff, I'm like, give me like 12 months, I can teach my son to do this job. I don't want a sponge, I want somebody who's going to come in and contribute right away. So don't say that in interviews, at least if you interview with me. I think that's really important, and I think new professionals want to do that. You've come out of graduate school, you've got great training, you've got great experiences, and you got a lot to offer. Have a more a more balanced integration of theory and practice. And I attribute this to new professionals, because I'll tell you, as I've kind of progressed forward, moved a little bit further, graduate school is further and further away. I think for me, being in a PhD program has helped, but a lot of my folks that are, been in the field 10 years or so and have been in the classroom, you kind of lose some of that theory. It still informs your practice, but the great thing about folks that are coming right out, new professionals, a lot of that's fresher, And when I talk about theory, a lot of the theories that I know, there's been theories written since then that you guys know about that are more current. Oh, you should read this report, or you should check out this article, and that's really great. So new professionals tend to have a really good balance there, and that's great. Like structure. How many of you really, really like structure? All right. Most of the younger hands went up. It's not always the case, but we have found that younger folks tend to really like structure, like policies, like new professional manuals, like guidebooks, the first day on campus, it's like, where's my training schedule? And it's like, wait, this is only 9 pages, where's the rest? No, I think it's good, and you're not the only ones. I was dealing with the vendors this morning, and they like structure too. So, but structure, I think especially for millennials, it's kind of something it's just, it's important. I like to know how to do X, Y, and Z, so I can do X, Y, and Z, because that's my job. There's nothing wrong with that. So, how are you going to share these experiences? Awesome. Okay, so sharing these ideas, okay? You've got all that knowledge that's ready to burst forth from you, okay? That's great. There's some good ways to do that, and then maybe some not so great ways, okay? So a good way, all right, is to learn the culture first, all right? This is something that I think is incredibly important. You have to learn your university, okay? Students, I hear this all the time, students are students. Well, they're really not, okay? My wife works at Elon University. I work at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Trust me, our students are not similar at all. They're all about the same height. That's about it, okay? Otherwise, it's completely different. Elon tend to be a little bit more affluent, UNCG, a lot of first-generation college students. It's a whole different thing, okay? So if I'm at UNCG for 10 years and everything's going great and I got these great programs and I take that to Elon, it may not work the same way, okay? So learning the culture is really important, okay? Learning your position first. This is another thing I tell all my young professionals, all the folks that come in, I try to tell them in the interview process, but when they get on campus, I reiterate this. Your best professional development is the job you're about to get, okay? So your professional development in your first year, even really into your second year, should be doing this job. That is how you're going to develop professionally. When folks come to me and say, hey, I want to chair a search committee, or I want to do this, I want to do that, it's like, slow down, okay? You will have opportunities to do all that wonderful stuff, but until you can manage your hall, have productive conversations with your RAs, manage a staff meeting, that's the important stuff, okay? So no matter what that job is, learn it first. When I became an AD, there was a lot of stuff I had to learn. It's a lot different than being a CRL. First of all, you don't see students that much anymore, and that's a bit of a change. Okay, so there's things you have to learn anytime you come into a position.
I was just going to say, that's a conflict from what you'll hear in grad school, right? In grad school, it's get involved. Do this. It's not just about your job, it's just not about the practical piece, it's all the other things that you do. And that's true, but when you're out there in the real position, it can feel very different. And so that conflict can be a struggle to work through in that first year. And those of you that are doing it right now, or have done it, can feel it, right? You're bright-eyed, you want to get involved with everything, and there's time for that, but it's taking a moment, breathing, slowing down the career for a second.
How many of you are hall directors, assistant hall directors, kind of in that vein? Okay. One thing that we're going to share with you guys is something that Elon University does. A lot of schools do it. NCHO's looks a little bit different. Elon's is really great, so we're going to share with you that one. But it looks at the position over the course of 3 or more years. Okay, so here is what you're going to get if you become a living professional over the course of your 3 years here, your 4 years here, etc. So you may not see teaching in your first year, but you'll see it in your second. Or you may not see chairing a committee in your first or second year, but you'll see it in your third. Okay, so I think from a supervisory standpoint, we tend to look at the position as, okay, if you stay for an allotted period of time, here's the experience I can promise you, but I can't give it to you in your first year. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. Learning the history first. I think this is good and bad sometimes. I think sometimes if you know that program didn't work in the past, then you're more likely not to try it again. Well, believe it or not, something could work the next year that didn't work the year prior. Okay, and that's where I think young professionals are great, because they come in with these ideas. And if old people like me don't kind of step on it too much and say, oh no, we tried that 5 years ago, it wouldn't work. Well, 5 years ago, nobody in the residence halls. It's all new people. They've all graduated. Maybe it works now. Okay, but learn the history first. Maybe there's certain reasons things can't be done a certain way. Especially if you go from public to private. You wouldn't believe the rules and regulations that are different, both ways. Everybody thinks that private schools can do so much stuff. Public schools get a lot more freedom in certain areas. So that kind of transition is important. Small steps, okay? Don't come in and say, hey, I've got a new programmatic model on your first day. But you might say, hey, I got a better place to put the water. I don't know. Small steps, all right. So, getting feedback and consensus, I think I double clicked there. That's always a good way too, Talk to your supervisor, talk to other folks, kind of get that consensus. Don't say, hey, I've got a great idea, I'm going to go talk to the vice chancellor. You might want to get some feedback on that first, okay? Not so good ways, okay? That's not the way we did it at whatever that thing is going to be. Please don't say that, okay? That's, of course, informing why you think you could do it a better way because of the experience you had someplace else. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever, okay? But don't phrase it that way, you know what I mean? Okay? And we did this great, it worked great, we should do it here. That's also not a terrible thing to say, hey, we got this program I'm really excited about, and is there a way we can implement that here, but not just moving it from one school to the next, okay?
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about your professional development plan. At Elon, we call this the PDP. So a little bit about Elon's history for professional development. So residence life, a number of years, much smarter people than I, before I was even a fledgling at Elon, thought through in residence life how we can create a tiered experience where students are growing, staff are growing, and professionals are growing within their role. That is developed at Elon so that the entire Division of Student Affairs does a PDP, and the PDP has to be done by the end of October. That's very, very supportive of residence life. It's a wonderful thing for residence life, but it's also wonderful for the entire division. So we're going to talk a little bit about the residence life professional development plan, and then we're going to talk about what materials you can take away from this, because just because it worked at Elon, just what we learned, you need to tweak it, you need to look at your own institution and determine what works for you. Okay?
And we're going to share with you both Elon and UNCGs. So you'll even see there the differences between two schools that are fairly similar in the size of students on campus and that kind of thing, but very different things that we're kind of, focusing on or looking for from our professional staff.
Okay, so the professional development plan, we've talked a little bit about this already. But somewhere along the way, probably in your interview, for the first professional position, someone said, so where do you want to be in 5 years? And everyone says, I want to be a dean of students. I mean, that is clearly the only way that you can get anywhere is to proceed through residence life and you're going to become a dean of students. And then about 5 minutes into the job, you realize maybe residence life isn't for you. Maybe being a dean of students isn't for you. Maybe this field is right, but I'm not sure of my fit yet. So creating a professional development plan is incredibly critical, but when we're focused on being practical in our job, it's the last thing we do, not the first thing. And for millennials, that's going to feel conflictual because you want structure, right? So a professional development plan is wonderful because it helps you create that structure and in sometimes unstructured positions. So the other thing that Residence Life at Elon is doing is talking a lot about self-care. So any of you know a little bit of history of Elon University? I'm not going to go too deeply into it. It's a private institution. A lot of our students come from the New England area and North Pacific states in general. They're very affluent. They tend to be affluent. But then we also have a large number of North Carolina students that are not so affluent. So it's this intermingling of cultures that's really, really interesting, and social class. So the way that Elon has kind of found its place in a state that has great state institutions is to determine that they need to really seek students outside of their university, like I said, that are very affluent, right? So they have a lot of expectations. So Elon really creates this experience where every single student matters and every single student is unique and their experience is unique. What that also means is that we've seen a lot of burnout, especially in our new professionals, because we're asking for them to do such a large job that maybe is 3 people's jobs. Because anybody else been at private school? That's not an Elon specific thing.
Yeah.
You do your job, your friend's job, and the one down the street. Because there's not enough of us, and there's lots to do. So the expectations are kind of endless, and then at some point we have to determine what's doable, and then determine where we fit within that. So the professional development plan and the self-care plan are a way for you to say, this is what I need. This is what I need to be successful. This is what I need in a conversation with my supervisor to support me to be successful. And then also what's realistic at your institution. Because if I believe that at 5 p.m. I'm going to end my work at Elon or pretty much anywhere in residence life, that is an unrealistic expectation. It just, maybe operations, maybe moving on to a different piece of residence life can give you that. But that's not what you're going to get within your first professional position. So it's really important for you to be true to yourself, realistic with yourself, and realistic with your supervisor about the culture of your university and then what you can do within that. Okay? So, what we try to do at Elon, and I think at UNCG, because I've seen some of their work as well, you try to build a tiered system. If you jump in and, there's all these options and which one do we choose from, the create your own experience model, you can get lost within that. So what we try to do is create a 3-year tiered experience at Elon. We say 3 because we're realistic about where our new professionals are at, where they are in the field, and also our institutional model, which burns people out quickly. So we say 3 years. This is what we're going to give you. We hope you continue for more. We hope you give us 5. But if you can give us 3, that's what we're asking for. It is not a model that says you have to leave after 3, but it is a model that says we hope you give us 3. So within those 3, it is my role as a supervisor to give the best experience to my new staff that I possibly can. And if I'm not doing that as a supervisor, then I'm not giving the experience that they deserve. And so I say that for me, but I think Elon really believes that too. And the fact that our division is saying across the board we're going to do professional development plans, and this is from the program assistant level all the way to the VP of Student Affairs, that's pretty incredible. So we have a number of materials that we're going to share with you. Some of those are how to get involved in NCHO to continue that professional development. What we do at Elon is we say the first year, just what Chris said, the first year is about you knowing your role. And sometimes that's focusing and getting involved on the micro level so that you understand your position. And then as you grow within that position, you can start to take on new things. And it is not a one-size-fits-all model. I have a staff member right now that came in with 3 years of experience, both in graduate experience and then a professional experience before she got her graduate degree. So she's clearly at a different tier than maybe a new staff member that's just coming in out of graduate school. So we really try to work within that and support them with where they're at and what they're looking for in the next step. Okay. So I would love to believe that every single person that I supervise sees me as a mentor. But I also recognize the power differential and the power dynamic that occurs between your supervisor and your supervisee relationship. So I'm hopeful that I'm able to provide mentorship opportunity to the people that I supervise, but I also understand that they need someone sometimes outside of the work that we're doing and the relationship that we're having to get a real perspective about the work that we're doing within residence life and anyone. So Chris and I talked a lot about this. When I got into the field, I kind of fell into the field from social work. And I didn't understand the power that a mentor can give. And there comes a point in your career where it's hard to find those folks, right? Because you're in the middle, you're like in the middle of your professional field, and so it's difficult. Do you do it now? Where do you find somebody? How do you get involved? So I would say right at the beginning, consider how you can build a relationship with a mentor and have a couple. Have a mentor that's on your level. Have a mentor that's maybe a step above. Have a mentor that's a dean of students. If you only have mentors that are at the dean of students level, how will they ever remember what your experience really is? Because your experience, I can say it's similar to mine, but I don't really know that. So you need someone that can really balance you. Okay, so this is the big question. The 5 years, the 10 years, where are you going to be? What are you going to do? You're going to be a dean of students, right? And trajectory is up. You have to go up. So some of us that are in middle level positions, you get married maybe. Now everyone can get married, hopefully, in the state of North Carolina, right? So maybe you get married. Maybe your partner takes a job. Maybe you decide this isn't the job for you. Maybe you change your career path. Maybe you change your school. All of a sudden, your career path has changed a little bit. But creating a professional development plan that you're continually updating and continually thinking about and striving towards will help you stay on track. So don't get caught up in, this is my 5-year plan and it was what I said I was going to be in graduate school and this is all I can do and all I can be. It will change, probably 10 times. And when you all find the secret formula of where to get to where you want to be and the answer to all of this, please let me know because I'm still looking for that for me. I'm still trying to figure it out. Okay, so this is something, this is, if I had a pet peeve, this is my pet peeve. So we talk a lot about evaluation. We talk about how we provide evaluations to the staff that we supervise. The first question I would ask you is if, as a supervisor, are you giving effective evaluations? If you're ranking every one of 5, then you are not providing them an effective evaluation model. You need to be honest in your evaluation for them to grow. I'm not a 5 in everything that I do. There are things that I do better, and there are things that I need to grow in. And I think that's fair for everyone. So consider that, and then also consider, is your supervisor saying that you're a 5 in everything? Because if they are, they're doing the same thing you're doing, and you're not being honest. And it's hard to be honest. It's really hard to provide an honest feedback, right? So the first place you can start is doing that as a self-eval and being really honest with yourself about what your skill sets are and where you need to grow and how you can get involved. And that's where you start to connect your professional development plan to your own personal goals. Okay, so we're going to be really savvy. We're doing, some cool social media stuff. We're going to do tweeting and all sorts of crazy things I don't understand. But what we are doing on top of that is we created a Dropbox for you. The cool thing about Dropbox, the takeaway for this, is that you don't have to have Dropbox to see everything that's in Dropbox. So we're going to give you the link to our Dropbox, and it has all of our materials. So you can log right on, you can see it, download it, do whatever you want with these materials. Share, please. Things that are going to be in that. Elon, UNCG, all of our professional development plans and models will be in there. The self-care plan, as an example, will be in there. NCHO, things from NCHO, and then also ACPA. So when you're looking at core competencies and you're determining where you should be in your career, there's things that have already been created for us to follow. So work smarter, not harder.
And everything that we created will be in Word. So you can easily edit it, like take out UNCG and put your own school up there, Believe me, don't think we all created these things, overnight ourselves. Like, oh, one day I'm going to make a 3-year tiered professional development track. It comes from a lot of different stuff. A lot of it comes from, I'm sure you're familiar with NASP and ACPA, competencies list and that kind of stuff. That's where a lot of this is kind of rooted in, as it should be, because, that's our profession. But we share this stuff all the time. We share it with colleagues around the country. They share stuff with us. We make updates, so feel free to take it and make changes as you need to. So managing the grade.
Let me take the first one.
Sure. Well, let me give credit real quick. One of our CHOs is retiring this year after a long time in the state. That's Larry Hicks from UNC Chapel Hill. And managing the grade, the first time I heard that term was from him. I'm taking a slightly different twist on it, but I did want to give him credit for it. He was talking about what is the most important thing that he looks for when he's going to promote somebody from a new professional to kind of a supervisory position of those professionals. And he says, can they manage the grade? And what he means by that is anybody can enforce a policy. If you have a written policy, it's black, it's white, this is how the policy works. Anybody can be trained to do that, okay? Now what happens when you don't have a policy for the situation that you encounter, okay? That's called the grade. How do you make decisions in that? You know, that's the important thing to learn. How are you going to manage that process? We're going to talk about it a little bit differently, but that is something you should think about in your own professional development. Get good at that, you know, because as a supervisor, that's the first thing I'm looking for. You know, folks will say, here's the decision I make, I'm always going to say, why? You know, I just want to know why you made it, you know, and if they have a good, sound rationale, great. It's like, well, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Well, maybe not, you know, but if we could write a policy for everything, we wouldn't need professionals, you know what I mean? If there was a policy for everything, you wouldn't have to go to graduate school. You could just read the policy and say, oh, no, it's B today. Tomorrow it may be C. But it doesn't work that way. So that's why we spend so much time training folks. So you want to take that?
Oh, yeah. So when I think about what is politics, we throw that word around a lot. And if we all say we don't do politics, first of all, we're lying. We do. We function in a political environment all the time. But I also think that sometimes what we say is political really isn't political. It is just a different way to meet the same goal. And sometimes we disagree with the way to get there. But if we can decide that the end goal is the same for all of us, then it doesn't matter how we get there sometimes, just that we get there, right? So at the end all, what we all do is work with students and help students grow and help students graduate and matriculate, right? So when I think about what my supervisor is concerned about, she has to be concerned about budget, she has to be concerned about customer service, she has to be concerned about the student experience, right? A new professional often is thinking about student development. That's not wrong, but student development is very different, and it's a very different conversation than budget. The end goal is the same, and that's students, but how you get there is different. Is there anybody that works on the operations side of the house in the room? Okay.
Tony, throw your hand up, buddy. There we go.
So when we think about operations, there's facilities, a lot of times that's around safety, security, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's also about making sure that people feel safe and secure in their space and that there's good customer service within that. Also, it's concerned about the bottom line, which is fill the bed. We need to fill the bed. Because if we don't fill the beds, then it doesn't matter about all the fluffy stuff that we do in the programs that we provide and all of the training and supervision and all that wonderful thing on the other side of the house. If you don't fill the beds, we don't have a job. So that isn't less important, it's just a different conversation. And how you get there and how you talk about it matters, right? So if I'm only talking about student development theory when I'm saying this is the policy I want to create and this is really important, and I'm talking about it with an operations staff member, not that they don't appreciate that, but that's not their language. And then when I think about my supervisor or the dean of students, they have to handle all of the I'm angry, my experience wasn't fair, this is not okay. All of those calls that we all get, times that by 10, and that's oftentimes what a dean of students is dealing with. So it's very customer service driven. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong, it just means that it's a different conversation that they have to provide. So you have to speak their language.
Try to explain to a parent sometimes why you well, I'm mediating this roommate conversation with because student development theory is important, and I'm helping them develop. It doesn't always go that well when you tell the parent that, because they don't speak the same language either. They want you to fix the problem. Like, it's important for them to work through the process, because they learn from it. Yeah. Actually, try that next time you talk to a parent. So, managing the grade. Again, we talked about that a little bit within ambiguous decisions. Just use the policies, use your training, that kind of stuff, and make the best decision possible. But a lot of times when a young professional comes to me and I'll say, okay, explain to me, why you did this. Well, because of this, this, and this. I was like, but you understand the policy says to do X. well, yeah, but here's the reason I did it. I'm like, right, but you understand there's actually a policy that says to do it the other way. Yeah, but this mother was really mad. I'm like, see, there you go. You kind of backed off of what was the right decision because you got a little overwhelmed. Those are the easy things to kind of correct. It's more difficult when it's like, yeah, there's not a policy for that anywhere, but, you know, good job. So that kind of stuff, okay? So think about it. It comes with training, it comes with experience, and you'll get better at it, but that is something really important as you move forward.
So I think a lot of times there are things that I believe, and I think that everyone should believe what I believe because the world revolves around me, clearly, right? No, not at all. So your department may believe this, and you may believe this, but you've got to find some common ground in the middle. And that sometimes can feel very political. So it's figuring out what are your values, and what do you prefer, or what do you need? And I think those things are very different, right? Because sometimes you can get on board with what the university feels like, and it may not be what you prefer, but you can get on board with it. And then there's times when you have to decide, this isn't the right fit for me, and this is not my value system. And that's okay, but pushing your value system through the department isn't necessarily the right way to go.
So different school, different process. Okay, just keep in mind, different schools do things different ways. Sometimes they do them different ways for very good reasons. Sometimes they do them for reasons they haven't even really thought about in 15 years, and they just do them that way. But different schools do things differently. Okay, so you know, when you, again, it's important too when you talk to a mentor that's at another school. You know, if they say, well, you should do X, Y, and Z, is that really beneficial in your current culture? Is that going to work at your school? You know, and good mentors, they know to say, well, this is what I would do here, but we may look at it differently. You should, you know, to run this conversation by your boss and that kind of thing. But keep in mind, you know, that's the great thing about a conference like this is you get to talk to peers and you get to talk to folks that do things a little bit differently. You get to kind of think, wow, I would never work there. That's crazy that you have to deal with that. Or, wow, that's really great. That's why I talk to Lauren, so I feel better about my job. I already said my wife works at Elon. I was just joking.
Breaking my heart. Okay, so just the differences between graduate school and the first job. We talked about that a little bit. There's this idea that this first job, you're going to be able to change the world and make it better. You're going to get out there and you're going to put your ideas forth, and everyone, the clouds are going to clear and the sun's going to rain and it's going to be fabulous and wonderful. And then you get to the first professional job and you realize maybe you're at a state institution that have done things this way for the last 20 years. And you came in 5 minutes ago. And that's really what people say, right? You came in 5 minutes ago. So what do you know? But that doesn't mean what you have to say is invaluable. It just means you have to find the right way to say it. Or maybe you need to make good professional colleagues that have the ability to say it. Because maybe you haven't built up the social or political capital to say it.
Change is not always the answer. Something to keep in mind too, especially when it comes to navigating politics. You don't always have to change everything 100%. Maybe you can tweak it, maybe you can move it a little bit. Okay, but it doesn't always have to be changed. Change for change's sake is just bad. For those that are in the field probably more than 5 years, when you start going into like your 3rd or 4th division meeting talking about goals, you start to roll your eyes a little bit. It's like, this is going to be our 5-year plan. Well, after like 6 months, nobody remembers the 5-year plan. And then 5 years from now, like, oh, did we do that? Did we get that stuff done? Okay, well, some of it. And we'll just put the next stuff in our 5-year plan again. Okay? Or you get a new director that comes in like, we're going to change our mission statement. We'll spend 6 months going over a mission statement. That can be a little taxing, I think, especially for young professionals, mid-level staff like myself. It's like, can we just work with students? Like, you know, do we have to change those 4 words? Is it really going to impact what we're doing? So change is not always the answer. Sometimes it's needed, sometimes not.
This is my other pet peeve. So I always try to think at my supervisor level. When I'm bringing a problem, I'm not going to bring a problem if I don't have a solution. There's a difference between complaining, which we all need to do. At some point, you just want to complain. You don't really want to work through a solution, right? You just need to sit there, maybe have a beer, and complain about it, and that's okay. But then at some point, you have to make a decision of whether you're going to continue to complain about it or whether you're going to try to fix it. And sometimes that means that fixing it isn't perfect, right? It's not this idealistic answer. It's trying to find your way to navigate through the problem. So don't bring a problem if you're not going to bring a solution.
I can't tell you how many times I tell my staff they bring me an idea. I'm like, that's a great idea, but I don't have time to do it. So are you going to be able to do it? And they're like, well, not really. Okay, then we have to put that someplace for a little while and hold on to it because we can't do it right now. It's not that it's not a wonderful idea. It's just you don't always have the time to work on those kind of things right away. So my staff love this. I'm not going to say it as harshly to you as I say it to them because I don't want you to run out here screaming, okay? But I tell all of my young professionals, I guarantee you within 2 months of being on campus, they will have this conversation with me, okay? And it seems kind of harsh, but I think it is impactful. They'll complain about something and it's something that's bothering them, and a lot of times it's a very justifiable complaint. And I'll say, okay, well, here's some things we can work with, or here's some things we can kind of change that. And then a couple days later, they may come back and say, well, it's still happening, or this, or that. And after a while, I say, okay, at the end of the day, you have 2 choices when it comes down to any kind of decision related to your job. Can anybody guess what those 2 choices are?
Stay or go.
Oh, I love you. Stay or go, okay? And a lot of times, this has come up a lot at UNCG over the last couple of years with different things, where I just tell folks, at the end of the day, your choice in this whole matter is stay or go, okay? I don't mean to be harsh. I'm not telling you to leave, okay? But you have to decide how big of an issue is this for you, okay? You know, somebody's telling me this is an ethical thing, it's just morally wrong. I'm like, I get it. If you are morally outraged by this decision, you should quit. Like, wait, no, why would I quit? I don't know. You're telling me you can't get past it. It was a terrible moral decision on the part of the department. Like, what are you going to do? I don't, you know, if I felt that way, I'd leave. Like, well, no, it's not that bad. I'm like, well, see, that's the point you got to get to. Okay, so when I think, and I use this because I think once you put it in that frame of mind, it really makes it that much smaller. You know what I mean? Like, I have kids that are 4 and 5, and sometimes I tell them, like, is this the worst thing that's going to happen to you all day? And of course, they always tell me yes. But it's not normally. You know, like, well, it could be worse. You could have done that. Like, oh yeah, that's true. I guess, you know, you have to eat your broccoli, but it's not Brussels sprouts. You know, so those kind of things.
I just wanted to add, it also empowers people sometimes because people think that all they can do is complain. Going is actually an option because you free up that space for somebody who wants to be there.
Absolutely.
And you might find your next thing that you're supposed to be at anyway, so it's actually empowering to you.
I agree. Yeah, when I'm having like a really bad day and I'm like, I can't believe my boss just did that, I'm like, all right, I'm not going to quit. It's not that big deal. I'll move on. You know what I mean? I think getting in that frame of mind, not every day. Believe me, if you're thinking every day you might quit, yes, you should quit. But it's just this idea of how big a deal is this? Is this something I can learn to live with? Is there something that doesn't really bother me a lot? So, before we get to that, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions as well, but is there any questions or anything that we can kind of clarify that you guys want to talk about? Yes, ma'am.
So as I'm a graduate student and I'm in my 2nd year and preparing to go through all the job process next year, seeking for a job. So is there an effective question or anything I can do during an interview or a campus visit to find out about at least the culture in the office?
That's a great question.
Well, there's a couple things. I was just going to say that there's a couple things you probably want to find out. When you say culture, what does that mean for you? Does that mean your work-life balance? Does that mean how the political environment? So it's kind of narrowing in on what the question really is, right? So when you say culture, that can mean something very different to me than it would mean to you. So it's determining, kind of narrowing in, determining what you want to know out of that, and then asking the question and doing it respectfully. But if work-life balance is important to you, maybe asking. The one that everyone will ask and they don't get the right answer is, what does the typical day look like? Because you know in residence life there is no typical day, right? And maybe asking how many hours in a week do we typically work? How many hours are we in the office? How many hours are we out with our students? Those types of things get to the root of what you're looking for.
Everybody that we interview at UNCG, if they make it to a 2nd round, they'll get a question from myself or the director, and it's the same question. And it's, what are things that you have to have at the department you work for, things that are very important to you, and what are kind of deal breakers? Like if this existed at that school, I wouldn't want to work there. And then we're really frank when they tell us something, whether or not we can accommodate that. If they're like, it's really important to me to have this, ability to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, you probably won't get that in your 1st year, maybe in your 2nd year, but if you do really, really well in your 1st and 2nd year, I will assure you get that opportunity in your 3rd. Or, oh, I really want this. That is not our department. Like, that's just not something, that's not our structure right now, that's not something you're going to get. We've really enjoyed our time with you, but if that's a deal breaker, you shouldn't come to campus, So I also encourage our grads who are, or young professionals who are searching for their next job, ask that same question. Like, tell me the things about your department, tell me if I ask 5 of your people, what would they say about the department? And then when you get to campus, which I think is the only time you can really evaluate this, pay attention to the cues, Don't just, whatever you see around there is what the campus is like. Don't try to justify it. Don't try to say, oh, maybe it was just a bad day. Nope, it wasn't. That's exactly how it is. Okay? Everybody's got their best foot forward, got the shine on it during interviews, everything looks great. So if you see a crack in that, trust me, that crack is 15 times bigger. Same at UNCG. I'm not saying we don't play that game as well. There's all kinds of problems there. I'm probably not going to tell you about that during an interview. Okay? So you got to look for those kind of things.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Because you guys are much more experienced in this field, what would you say? You brought up the fact that you should learn your position. And I would love the opportunity to do that, but I'm at a very, very, very small school. So it was, here's your new position, a month later, you're on this committee. I mean, it's just, so how, and you can say no, but then
Yeah, you
say
can't.
you can.
Yeah.
So how would you say to navigate something like that when what I wanted to do is really, really, truly be the best at what I was hired to do, and that I don't mind,
Yeah.
but I
That sounds like
wasn't able
Elon.
to. Wasn't able
That
to.
sounds
So
like Elon.
What kind of advice do you have as far as that?
I just had the same conversation, that's why I'm smiling about it. I just had a conversation with a colleague that's struggling with that same thing.
Yeah.
He's a one-person office, and so he is put on every single committee that has anything, touches his work at all, he is the person that's put on that. So he had to determine, he had to negotiate how to have that conversation of, if you want me to do these three things, I need to take this off. But recognize and be honest with yourself what your university is like and what the culture is like, right? So we know at Elon that it's not going to be a 40-hour work week. It's going to be a 60-hour work week. And if that's not what you want to do, then Elon probably isn't the school for you. So it's my job to make sure that I roll out the red carpet, but not allow it to be brown on the other side. So that means I need to share what our culture is so that people that are coming in are the right fit for that institution. And there's all these other things that Elon gives that are amazing. So it's balancing that, right? So it's you determining, is this your right fit? If it's not, there's nothing wrong with that, but the question is, do you stay or do you go?
I think there's a timing in that too. I think you might have to take on some of that stuff short term and kind of plan an exit strategy. I'll give you an example.
Plan an
I
exit
think it's
strategy.
important.
That's
I'll
awesome.
give you an example for me because it doesn't change. It doesn't change at all. But so I work in residence life, okay, but I'm also the interim director of the Veterans Resource Center. Okay. So how that came about is, as I was asked to run this Veterans Resource Center, I said, okay. Then I was asked again, and I said, no. And I said no for very good reasons. When my director asked me, I said, Tim, here are the things I'm doing right now that you put on my plate. Here are the things the division's put on my plate. Here's my wife, here's my kids, here's my dissertation. I can't do that. So the third time, it was the vice chancellor who came and asked, and I said, sure, of course, I'll do it. But at that point, it was, here are my conditions to do this. Here's the staff I'm going to need. Here's when I can have to stop doing this. You'll have to hire somebody else within this period of time. That's not a bad thing to say, I think that's an honest thing, and I said, Chair, I'm writing a dissertation, I have 2 small kids, I already have these other things, and, plus a job that I try to do well, working with young professionals is the part that I like, that's the important part. You're asking me to do this, here are the things I have to drop, so that's a good conversation I think that we can have.
It's
Yeah.
bargaining. And that's exactly what my colleague did. The other thing that he did that is very useful is he did a time study. He took a week, he did a time study, he wrote down every single thing that he does, because it's a lot harder to say, when you say I'm busy, why would your supervisor really know what that busy looks like for you? But when you can say I'm busy because I'm on 10 committees, and I can't get this work done because I'm never in my office, and let me show you how many committees I'm on. My supervisor did that at that point she was being supervised by the Dean of Students at the university. She did that and realized that she was out of her office for 80% of her job. In committees, getting more work. So that helped him understand that, wait, you know what, I need to take you off some of this because you're not effective. You can't do what we hired you to do.
So we will have time at the end to answer questions. You can certainly come up and talk to Laura and I. We're going to go into lunch and that kind of stuff. We've got a case study. If we'd like you guys to maybe work with just your table and that kind of stuff, we'll talk back to the group a little bit. We also had some time. We didn't think we'd get to it, but at the end, one of the things we talked about is actually we were developing this case study or working through this presentation over a few weeks. We were saying a lot of our conversations would turn into, man, you wouldn't believe what's happening at my campus. Or I would really love to talk about this as a case study, but if anybody from my campus is there, they would know about it, that kind of thing. That I think is valuable, and you're at the right place to do that. So if there's things you're struggling with at your campus, these are great folks to talk to, get some perspective, that kind of thing. So this case study, okay, I see some smiling. This probably hits near and dear to some of your hearts, but your department prohibits professional staff from having pets in the residence halls. We're talking about our living coordinator staff, obviously. One of your coworkers has a dog that you found out is residing in his apartment. Your RA has informed you that this is occurring, okay? This person often lets the dog roam around the halls, and numerous residents know that dog is there. The staff member has asked residents not to say anything. Here's the little kicker. You want a pet policy. Who doesn't want a pet policy? Okay. All right, so talk amongst you, like what would you do in that kind of situation? There's a lot of facets there. Do you have
Don't bring a problem without bringing a solution.
Right, for
I
people who
like it.
aren't allergic, who don't have those issues, you know.
Yeah, it's too much of a liability, we were thinking, as far as like in a residence hall where, you know, yeah, allergies, like she said, just what kind of dog it is, it's on the halls, and like, that's much.
I think most folks are probably on board with that, right? Look, we know the dog has to go. So you, as the colleague of the person that has it, what are you going to do next in that kind of situation?
We talked about how, out of professional courtesy to the staff member, we would tell them ahead of time that we would have to tell our supervisor, and then go and have a conversation about it with the supervisor. And we talked a lot about that conversation and what it would include, including like, I'm supportive of a pet policy, maybe this is a proposal that we can put together. So that was sort of the direction that our group
Yeah,
went.
and basically we both go together with the proposal in a way of telling that you have one, but also, proposing that this be something.
So how many people said they would talk to the person first and then go to the supervisor? Okay. What would your time lag be there, just out of curiosity?
Yeah.
So like, hey, you either walk out of your office right now and tell me you got a dog or I'm going.
I would probably put it 24 hours.
Okay, I'm just asking.
Because the students will probably go before I will.
Hey man, they don't tell it. This is for, hey, whoever, this is what's gonna have to happen. How do you feel? Are you gonna get rid of this pet? Because if they say yes, then I'm gonna say, when are you gonna get rid of the pet? And then I'm not gonna have to report that to my supervisor.
Okay, I see your point.
You're working in the gray area.
We were talking about, we all kind of agreed in our group that we would definitely confront the person and bring it to the supervisor's attention, but we would probably give some rationale as to why we're doing it, because in terms of this, working housing on a campus is a small field and we need to stick together. And so you need to put forth a united front in terms of policies and procedures and upholding each other to that same standard. So talking about how if you have a pet and residents know, you're telling residents not to tell, that does not make our department legitimate.
Right.
And so giving some explanation as to why I'm doing this for the sake of the department. And then we also talked about maybe since some residents knew about the dog, maybe poll those residents and see what was the experience like. So maybe bring forth through this, perhaps a petition with some sort of rationale from some students who have already, let's be real, have seen the dog.
Sure.
What kind of benefits have that had on the students? Because I bet there's been some positive attributes that have been associated with the student interaction with the dog.
Yes, ma'am, in the back.
And I also think that if you are in support of a pet policy, I think talking with that coworker, colleague about maybe developing one, telling them, hey, the dog needs to go, maybe you have a friend in town that they can keep the dog or something like that, but also let's develop a pet policy. Let's talk to our supervisors about the importance of us maybe having pets on campus so we can have that balance. And you, like just in case you don't have like a partner policy, like they can live with you or something like that, to have that company to help promote work-life balance too.
Absolutely. The key things for me in this one, and kind of how I walk through it, and what I would talk with my staff about is, okay, so one of your coworkers has a dog which is in the department. Well, that's a violation of policy, okay? It's become a bigger problem because your RA knows about it, which means everybody knows about it, you know what I mean? And now that your RA has brought it to you, they're looking to you of, what are you going to do? So this is not just a problem about your colleague, now you're involved in this because if this situation is not rectified, they're going to look to you about like, what are you doing? Okay? The biggest problem, to me at least, is the fact that the person is telling residents, oh, don't tell anyone. Okay? So this, in Chris Gregory universe of University Chris Gregory, would get you fired. Like, for me, because if you're telling residents, hey, I'm violating the policy, but don't tell anybody. I don't care if it's the dog policy or the drug policy. There's a problem. Okay? So, as somebody hearing about this, and the reason I asked you about the timeline, I had a very unfortunate colleague this happened to in graduate school. They knew about something like this, went to the person and said, hey, you've got to come forward, it wasn't a situation like this, it was a little bit worse. But that person did not go to the director within a week, okay? The director found out about it, but this other person hadn't said anything. They fired everybody who knew about it. And said, why did you not come forward? It was a serious situation, don't get me wrong. But that's the same kind of thing. Well, I talked to him about it and told him to come forward. You failed. You should have brought this to me at that point. You should have walked into my office, etc. for graduate students. Okay? So just be careful where you put yourself in those kind of situations. Now, every school would handle this differently. Every person would handle it differently. That's just my thinking on it, and maybe not the way it would work at your school. I know at some other schools, I got friends out there, they'd be like, hey, you can't have a dog. Did we forget to tell you that? Like, it would be a totally different conversation. But at Chris Gregory University, which you're all welcome to work at, we would find out.
The other thing that's kind of gray on this, that's interesting, is if by telling, this is kind of an unintended result and not a positive one. By telling your supervisor that this is happening, you can set your pet policy back. Just recognize that you have to do what's right in the moment, but recognize the fallout of that, which is if you're working on a pet policy and they find out that somebody just brought in their pet, they're less likely a lot of times to allow something to go forward because they don't trust you. So that's some of the gray area that you have to grapple with in a decision like this that seems pretty simple, right? But it's not simple because this is your colleague, this is your bestie, you go out with them, you're friends with them, and now you gotta hold them accountable.
So, we didn't really have a chance to get to this, but I do encourage you during the conference that if you're facing something at your campus, talk with a colleague. That's one of the great things about being here. Here's the information about Dropbox. If you leave a business card up, we will email you the link so you don't have to write it down. Or if you take one of our business cards and email us, we will send you the link as well. That's how you can get a hold of us. So please take a card. If you have questions, not even about the presentation, if there's anything we can do to help you, you've got any kind of questions about the field, we'd love to help you out with that. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of NCHO, I wanted to thank you very much. The session was excellent. And I'll take it.
I will. I'll take care of you. Not a problem. Actually, let me see your pen.
Absolutely. Yes.
Got it. Thank you. I'll make sure you get back.
Good, how are you?
Oh, good to see you.
Thank you.
Doing well. How are you, Tiffany? Pleasure. Thank you very much. I'll make sure you get the materials and Dropbox information. Thank you very much. Amanda. We'll send that information to you.
I'm like, right.
I know, be careful.
Amanda, what hall do you work at?
Jones.
Okay. I lived in ACOP. I was an RA in ACOP for 2 years.
Okay, cool. Sure that goes that way.
Hey. There you go. Appreciate it, brother. Make sure you get the information.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Oh. Take these. We'll make sure we get it to you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have one staff right now. Very nice.
Yeah. He's in the English department.
So you got to
I got
hang out
it. He
together.
does some of that crossover, but he actually used to work at NCHO. We have a role, it's kind of like the CRO, which is residential college, so he teaches, he's a faculty member as well, and he was doing that in NCHO. Oh, yeah. Plenty of stuff to do.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you as well. Good morning.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll probably have a little bit different conversation. Yeah, definitely. Sure. Okay. Well, why don't you set up time to meet with me or Megan or Coretta? We can kind of walk you through some of that kind of stuff and talk about grad programs. I meet with a lot of RAs that are considering, graduate school, kind of walk through that stuff. I'm totally
No, it's fine.
Yeah, then let's get some time together. Talk for a little bit.
Put in there, without intending to. Like, this is great. What have you done? But this is also really beneficial.
Okay.
And that will
Definitely. Sure thing. All right. Thanks, Melissa. Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
I'm Chris. Kendra. Nice to meet you. We'll
Sorry,
send you
my
all this information. But if you have questions, just the conference center. Let us know.
Thank you.
hard. You need this.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot, yeah, it's a lot.